Hello, everyone. I am your host, Alejandro Colindres. Welcome to Series 2 of the podcast, The Road to Champagne, 13 tested principles to drive your career to success. This podcast series will benefit professionals that have room for growth in their career, especially young professionals. In Series 2, we are talking to professionals with brilliant careers in different stages of their journey to find out how the 13 principles have helped them. You can see the framework of the 13 principles in the website roadtochampagne.com. Welcome back, everyone. Please remember you can share your feedback or questions by emailing hello@roadtochampagne.com or via the contact page in the website. I would love to hear what you are liking and what you would like to see more of going forward. So many times, our career brings us to a fork in the road. We face a key decision. Should I continue down this path or change course? In previous episodes, we heard from friends who started in the corporate world or in government and then became entrepreneurs. Or they went from being an entrepreneur to a world-class artist, etc. Those forks in our road can come unexpectedly, or because we put in the right effort to make it appear. Either way, it is an intriguing and fascinating move that hopefully brings us more success. Sometimes, those forks appear and external forces try to nudge us in a certain direction that may or may not be ideal for us. After just a few years working in the technical and scientific side of the food industry, I decided I wanted to move towards the business side of the food industry. I created that fork by going to business school. At some point, a former boss wanted me to go in a certain direction, and I had to resist. My next guest also had such forks in his career. The latest one allowed him to launch his own business after working in R&D in leading food companies for many years. I am very excited to be joined by Jose Amarista. Jose is a seasoned technical professional in consumer products research and development. He is currently leading a startup to launch an innovation in the medical field and recently started his own consulting business. Prior to that, he was vice president of margin enhancement at Pinnacle Foods in New Jersey. Before that, he worked for leading food companies including Warner Lambert, Pfizer, Procter & Gamble, and Cadbury, which is now Mondelez. He holds a BS in chemical engineering from Universidad Simón Bolívar in Venezuela, his home country, and obtained his executive MBA at Farley Dickinson University. We worked together at Cadbury almost 18 years ago. When not working or with family, he enjoys running, biking, and playing the piano, although he still has ways to go. Jose, welcome to the Road to Champagne podcast. How are you?
Good, Alejandro. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, Jose. Yes, it's great to also catch up with you. It's been a while. So, Jose, let's start with the general question. Tell us a little bit about your career. Where did it start? How did it evolve? And where are you now?
I started in Warner Lambert, confectionery division of Warner Lambert, Chicle Adams in Venezuela as a product development engineer. At the time, my first project was to develop product and process for repatriating freshen up gum. That's how old I am, which had a unique process, nitrogen cooling, etc., very specific processing conditions. So I became an expert working with the experts. Because of it was a hot product at the time, demand was very high. The plant manager asked me to really run the small department. So very early in my career, I had the opportunity to lead a small crew.
Right.
A lot of pressure, a lot of work. It was great to have that opportunity. But then they liked me too much in manufacturing. I wanted to go back to product development. I had the opportunity to go back to product development with Procter & Gamble. Mm-hmm. I joined the Latin American division, which was based in Caracas as well. And that's when I believe my career really took off, because then I had my scope of work and the geographical exposure that I had really told me, oh, this is what I want to do. This is what I like to do. I mean, not just being constrained to a geographical area, but just to be able to interact with headquarters, reapply in the region, etc., being aware of a bigger business in general. For the time I was with Procter & Gamble, Warner Lambert was kind of asking me to come back. And finally, they made me an offer that I couldn't refuse. So they asked me to create an organization for the Andean region at the time, which I did. I came back. It was a great opportunity. Eventually, with things changing in my home country, I was offered a position in the headquarters in New Jersey. That's what brought me to New Jersey more than 25 years ago.
Yeah.
I led a team of 6 or 7 PhDs working on gum-based development. Then I was in charge of productivity. I was in charge of a number of things. And finally, I was assigned to lead Latin America, which is exactly what I wanted to do.
Nice.
I did that role for several years, and then we were taken over by Kraft. became Mondelez. And I decided it was time for a different challenge. I'd been doing not the same thing, but similar roles for too long and within the same categories. That's when I joined Pinnacle Foods. I was looking for a new challenge, and I found I don't know, probably 20 different challenges. That's how many categories Pinnacle had participation in. So I had the chance to learn about all these different categories. The company did so well that Conagra Brands took us over. I don't know if I had it on me, but everywhere when I went, something happened. Speak of being adaptable, because we'll talk about that later. Conagra decided to shut down the New Jersey sites and relocate to Omaha and Chicago. That didn't work for me. So they retained me for a couple of years up to last May. At that point, I said, well, I always wanted to really have my own consulting business and, if possible, do my own entrepreneurial initiative. It was the right time, which I'm loving and enjoying a lot. But most of all, I'm reapplying a lot of things and a lot of skills that I learned throughout my career. So there's a lot to be said about that, because as an entrepreneur and a startup, you have to wear so many hats, and learning from the best in your past years is priceless. That's the best way to do it.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that journey, Jose. I mean, I love how you moved across different companies. Your scope was increasing, different countries, which, obviously increases adaptability. And then also now in an entrepreneurial stage, which is, requires a different set of skills from you. It kind of reminds me a little bit about, one of my previous guests, Juan Salinas, who was a product developer in the food industry and now has started his own company. Yes. So that's pretty awesome. Jose, and one thing that you said earlier is that you, I guess, ran the risk of getting stuck in manufacturing when you wanted to be more on product development. And I just want to point that out, because I think that happens to many of us. Sometimes, we want our career to go one way, but then, other forces are kind of like taking us in a different way. And then that's when you need to proactively steer your career back in the right direction. Otherwise, other people will do it for you, and you will go down a path that maybe you didn't really choose or enjoy.
Absolutely. That speaks strongly about grabbing the wheel, because at the time, the company wants you in one direction, but that's not what you want to do. Then it's time for you to grab the wheel and say, well, I'm the master of my destiny, so to speak. And then that's what I want to do. So that at the time, that's why I had different offers, and Procter & Gamble offered me exactly what I was looking for. So good thing that I did, because everything I learned in Procter & Gamble, I reapplied afterwards in my career. So that's
a good reminder for everybody. So Jose, of the 13 principles, which would you say are the 3 that you believe had a strong impact on your success?
First of all, I had to mention, Alejandro, I enjoyed this model, and I hope that I had that 15 years ago, because
Thank you.
Having these things so well structured and so easy to explain and reapply is good.
Thank you.
I picked the 3, adaptable, know yourself, and grab the wheel, those 3. Being adaptable, I alluded to that earlier. I went through, I think, 5 or 6 different mergers and acquisitions, changes of command in general. You have to be adaptable. There's a lot of things that change, different cultures, different people, different ways of working. Don't make any decisions until you understand exactly how that change is going to impact you. Because a lot of people, for instance, when Pfizer took over Warner Lambert, people immediately panic and say, well, they're going to send us who knows where. And then so people feel that they don't have a grip on their future. And then they start jumping ship or making wrong decisions.
Correct.
And there's one specific anecdote that the entire whole product development team went over to Pfizer, thinking that that way they will stay in the campus in New Jersey. And 3 months later, they said, well, you're going to be moved to somewhere in Pennsylvania. So for us that we stayed put with where we were, and became Cadbury afterwards, we were much better off. So be adaptable, but also make decisions when you know how the change impacts you. That's important.
Yeah, not being afraid of the change, right? Basically, wait for it, understand it, and then you can weigh your options, right? But once you understand it and what it means to you, but just because things are going to change, we shouldn't have a negative lens saying, oh my gosh, it's going to get worse for me. No, it could be a growth opportunity.
Exactly.
I like what you're saying. You have to wait and understand what that change means.
Exactly. The other thing that's important is that you have to tailor and modify and adapt your leadership style as you move up in your career, because otherwise you'll be ineffective. Thinking that being the same way your entire career will work, that's not how it works.
Yeah, for sure.
So the second one is know yourself. and is based on feedback. You need feedback from people.
Oh, yeah.
You need to encourage feedback from everybody, from peers, from superiors, from subordinates if you have them. But when it comes to leading others and to be a people manager, two things have to happen. You have to like it and you have to be good at it. Knowing if you're good at it, you know that by feedback. You have to ask people, am I good at what I'm doing? And if I'm not good, what should I do different to be good? So that's extremely, really important.
Yeah.
So getting feedback. Later in my career, for me, was extremely useful and essential, I will say, having a coach that basically has a structured way to analyze your situation, talk to your peers, and then feed that back to you. One piece of feedback that I got from one of my coaches was that she suggested acting lessons.
Really?
Believe it or not. You know me, Alejandro. I'm 6'3", over 200 pounds, more than I and I have a rusty voice. So the image I commanded to people was intimidating. And I didn't smile that much. So she said, well, you know what? Not that you have to take acting lessons to become, a Hollywood star, but just to be aware of how you portray yourself to others, because that was an important part of that. So I started doing that. Probably the Jose that you met by Cadbury was very different to the one that was 2 years earlier. Being aware of that and being conscious that people perceive you differently.
Yeah. And it's important that you know that, because if you don't, maybe you wouldn't have gotten a promotion or you wouldn't have gotten a job offer if you still come across as, too direct, too intimidating. That's why we need feedback, so that you can say, oh man, I got to course correct this. It might not be a big thing to me, but to others it is. It might be an anchor to my own growth. Right. So it's about removing those anchors, right? And you need the knowledge first.
And it could be an immediate turnoff. You do the wrong thing in the wrong forum. That's it. You're done. And finally, a third one that I picked was grab the wheel. We alluded to that a couple of times here. I mean, there's times in your career that nobody's going to look after your career better than yourself. Yeah. And nobody knows better than yourself what you like to do, even though some leaders think that they know better than you what's best for you. So I think I was lucky that I didn't have those hit those crossroads many times in my career, but the 2 or 3 times that it happened, it was clear to me that I had to grab the wheel and I had to do something to really change direction because it wasn't going the way I wanted. I liked the experience in manufacturing, but I wanted to go back to product development. It didn't happen. It forced me to move to a different organization for that to happen.
Yeah,
you have to grab the wheel because offers I had, but I never had the drive to move. Until I said, you know what, this is exactly what I want to do. Boom, let's go.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Jose. And I can relate. Before working at Southern Glazers, I was at RBI, Restaurant Brands International. And my boss was the head of procurement, global procurement. But my role was half supply chain, half procurement. I was the head of Latin America. To your point, his vision of my growth was to have a global procurement role in Switzerland. None of that appealed to me. I wanted to continue in Miami and I wanted to do strategy, not even supply chain. So knowing that, within the company, the path that was being presented to me was not what I wanted, I had to grab my own wheel and, I changed jobs and I went to Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits to do strategy right here in Miami, which is exactly what I wanted. So to your point, if you're not bold about managing your career, you're going to end up in places that you're not going to enjoy. And then, that could really explode.
And the thing is, Alejandro, that it sounds so obvious to you and I, but you'll be surprised how many people I have managed and helped and coached to say, move on. When we had this situation with Pinnacle Foods and Conagra basically interviewed people, offered positions in Omaha. If you said no, they said, okay, your end date is such.
Yeah.
I told everyone in my team, start looking for opportunities. Don't wait until the end date. If you can leave earlier, much better, but don't waste time. Some guys were like, really? Of course. I mean, what are you waiting for? Start finding opportunities while you're still here. That should be obvious that you have to grab the wheel.
For sure. So, Jose, which of the 13 principles did not or do not come naturally, perhaps forcing you to put extra effort and attention to them? And how have you improved?
It was an ability to say yes, principle number 4. Especially later in my career, especially when your life gets more complicated, because at the beginning, it was kind of simple to say yes. I was single, etc. So I had different assignments. I would say yes to everything. Then your ability to say yes is impacted by other factors.
Yeah.
For instance, in craft, there were opportunities to go to Bangkok, to Shanghai. But my wife had a good career where she was. I also have 2 daughters. They gave me the look like, what? You're going to separate me from my friends and all that and everything that I do here?
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean that you're not going to say yes, but those things really impact your decision. And
yeah, that's a good point. Earlier in your career, you should be all about the yes, right? Because it'll expose you to new knowledge, new experiences, new networks, etc. But obviously, as you mature in your profession and in your life, and once you have a better definition of what success looks like, I think it's natural to have some extra filters to, screen those opportunities to say, hey, is this worth it or not? What's going to be the impact, not only to my career, but the people around me who are part of my life? As you mature, it's perfectly fine to start being more selective on your yeses, for sure.
Correct. More choiceful, more demanding.
On principle number 8, build expertise. What are the 1 or 2 areas of deep expertise that you have created over the years?
So applying situational leadership to coach others to become leaders. I had the good fortune of coaching young professionals through the process of managing people and being able to persuade and become leaders. In other words, you transfer your knowledge to that person, so that person knows everything that you know and eventually can replace you. That's the end result of that. So that was my operating principle.
Yeah.
I had one brilliant young professional in Pinnacle. I told him, and I told that to a couple of people in my career, that if I live long enough professionally, you'll probably be my boss one day, because these guys, you can tell that this guy has it.
Yeah.
He told me the reason I left the company I came from was because I asked my boss, how long do you think it will take me to learn what you know? And the guy said, well, if it took me 20 years, it'd probably take you 25. And immediately I decided to leave. So I told him, you know what, my objective is for you to learn that as soon as possible, because I don't expect to be next to you for 30 years. So my purpose is to teach you everything and in fact, kind of weed out stuff that is not important for you to know. So you focus on the really important things that you need to learn from me. I'm not going to say that I mastered that, but I used situational leadership principles throughout my career.
Great.
The second thing that I had the opportunity to do is just working on this strategic thinking continuum, going from a business need through the element of strategy, creating the organization, and finally implementing the plan. Very rarely you have the opportunity to do something like that. You define the business opportunity, go from 0 to implementation in one shot.
Yeah.
I know you have, because we worked together in one of those, but that's not a common occurrence. In Pinnacle particularly, I had the opportunity to work from 0 to implementation and being successful. And I reapplied that model a couple of times, and I'm applying that in my consulting business, and I'm applying that in my current entrepreneurial initiative. And that's one thing that I believe I've been doing very well over the years.
Yeah, those are the most exciting projects, when you start with an empty, blank PowerPoint slide and you're going to be crafting the strategy. It becomes a presentation. Then you convince the right stakeholders. Then you're leading the project to implement it. And then, if you're launching a product, it's now on the shelf or whatever you're doing, right? Taking it from start to finish through the whole cycle is pretty amazing.
And fighting for resources. I still remember back in the day, and you remember that project, when you and I you were fighting with me for my resources to join your project. That's a fun part. It takes a lot of persuasion. Not only you define what are the resources you need and what are the key specific individuals you need in that team. You want the best, of course, but then you need to negotiate with the person in charge of those resources to blend them to your project. So I'm sure you remember those days fondly.
Of course. That was one of the most exciting and entrepreneurial stages when we were launching the chocolate category in Brazil. That was pretty cool.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So Jose, on principle 13, learn from all leaders. Could you share a story of a role model or maybe an anti-role model that influenced your leadership style? How did it help you increase emotional intelligence?
Well, I think I can share many, many stories, but I will concentrate on 1 or 2. The best one I can remember, and I have to mention that, is my own father. My dad was a role model in many aspects. I remember I had a situation with a basketball coach, and I was like really, really upset with what was happening. I ran that by him, and he said to me, you know what? Whatever you do, your dignity has to prevail. That's the one thing that you never compromise and you never let it be challenged. And I always remember that, which speaks very directly to sticking to your values.
Yeah.
I challenged my coach and said, I don't think that this is right. And in the end, he gave up and things were fixed. But my dad told me, if that didn't happen, just leave. You cannot compromise your dignity. That's probably the best advice that I could get.
Yeah.
And then after that, I had good fortune having great leaders. One of them is one that you and I know very well, Marcos.
Oh, yeah.
I learned a lot from him. I learned many things from Marcos, but I'll just mention these two. The one was this very simple, very effective way to figure out strategic thinking. He said to me, all you need to do is just picture in your head how you want it to be, by when. And I said, well, of course. It sounds very simple when someone like him tells it, but I applied that many times exactly like that. And I taught that to other people exactly like that, and they got it. And it's very effective. So I will thank Marcos for that.
Yeah.
The second thing that I learned from him was how to manage your energy, how much energy you put behind things that are important versus those that are not, and when to decide when good suffices. So you save your energy and your best effort for the real important stuff. That's key and that's fundamental.
Yeah.
Once we define the priorities, we say, okay, this is where we should focus our energy. These are the things that we can delegate, and this is stuff that where good is sufficient. Don't put more effort on that. Having that kind of a 2x2 matrix to say, okay, effort versus priority was key. I mean, how we impact your emotional intelligence is that it's a lot easier to explain that to somebody when you have a structured way. You probably remember this from me, Alejandro, that I cannot explain one thing without starting drawing a diagram. So drawing a 2x2 matrix, it's a lot easier to explain that.
Yeah, that's great. I actually used that 2x2 matrix yesterday in a meeting in New York to prioritize the 35 recommendations that I proposed for solving a problem. So I use that all the time. But that's great. And Jose, what you're saying is so valuable. It's about being selective. Who do you want to imitate? It could be a parent. It could be, a family member. It could be a coach from a sports team. It could be a boss. It could be somebody else's boss that you're working with. But everybody can teach you some valuable lessons that you want to grab and say, hey, yeah, I want to use this. And at the same time, there's other things that you want to say, I don't want to be like that guy. I'm going to do the opposite of what he's doing, right? Because he's mistreating his team. I don't want to do that. So Jose, I'm going to pass the mic on to you and let you ask me a question.
Oh, yeah. What is your perspective as to how to account for personal and emotional impact of career decisions, particularly when being successful implies limited family time, added stress, or it simply restricts your social life? So basically, you're being successful professionally, but you have no one to enjoy it with.
That's a very deep question, Jose. And I think it definitely needs to factor in. And I'll give you one recent example. I had this opportunity pop up, and it was very interesting. It was in the food industry across different sectors. I have worked in all of those sectors. It was, financially attractive, but it was in LA, and it would have required a lot of travel, even internationally. Earlier in my career, that would have been awesome. I would have been like, hey, when can I start? But, the fact that I was considering being on a plane again, like I was when I was a consultant at McKinsey and Carney, I did that and I learned a lot from those experiences, but that is not who I want to be at this point in my career. I had to factor in what would be the implication to my family. It's farther away from my family that, lives in Central America, and I would be on the road again. So it didn't really feel like it was the right move from a family perspective, right? I don't mind travel, right? And I could travel from where I am right now and my wife would be fine. But that was one example of factors changing over time. Like I said earlier, your criteria for what is an awesome opportunity will evolve as you mature in your profession. Not that I wouldn't move, but I wouldn't move to then live on a plane. Right? That's what I'm saying, right? So therefore, I think when you are earlier in your career, you probably want to put more weight on, hey, what am I going to learn from this job opportunity? What is it going to expose me to? How will it help me get closer to the future self that I am envisioning, right?
Is it taking me anywhere? Is the juice worth the squeeze?
Correct. So I think you cannot separate the personal implications from the career implications. They're kind of intertwined. And therefore, you probably have a long checklist of what criteria does this opportunity meet. And there might be some tough choices where, there is a very appealing opportunity from a career perspective, but maybe it is not from a personal perspective. And I think also, Jose, you mentioned stick to your values. I think that is also part of the equation, because if one of your values is being family oriented, having strong social networks and being present with your friends, then you might probably not thrive in a job that pulls you away from those two aspects, right? So you need to find the balance between what do you value in your life and what will this opportunity bring to my career. I think you can't get away from trying to find that balance.
We're on the same page on that.
All right. So, Jose, as you know, each of our audience members is on their journey to success, trying to get to their champagne. What advice can you offer professionals starting off in their career or about to, so that they can be more efficient on their drive to success?
Demand the leadership that you deserve. Don't be content and don't succumb to poor leadership. Mm-hmm. And again, poor leadership is a learned behavior. So people can learn to be a good leader, but you have to give them feedback. Give feedback to your supervisor. You know what? I'm not having it. So this is what I would like. And then it will help your supervisor and it will help you, because your supervisor may say, you know what? This is the reason I'm doing this. It's not that I'm a bad leader. So have that discussion. Don't keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
From the same token, visualize who are the right leaders in your organization and reach out to them and talk to them and tell them, you know what? I like how you do this. I like how you do that. What's your thinking process to get to that behavior? They will appreciate that, and you will learn a lot from that experience. You don't have to be limited to just your boss or two other people in your organization. Go to anywhere in your organization. And besides that, go to your cross-functional partners and ask them what they do and how they do it and why they do it. Because in the future, in where you and I are now, it's very useful to know how regulatory works and or how other functions that you never worked on work. Early in your career, it's important to do that, because then you know what, that's definitely not something that I would like to do in the future. But maybe there's something that they do that you like to do in the future. Learning how the different functions work is extremely, extremely useful. So the two messages here are: demand the leadership that you deserve and learn about the other functions and have a grip of what they do. The other recommendation is find your brand, but don't overdo it. When you overbuild your brand and you think you're infallible, and then you're like, well, I know everything and I'm the expert here, and you become a grumpy expert. And the organizations don't like that, because you know what? We know what he's going to say. We know his answer. And it's hard to realize that. I got that from a coach that I had in the past. And he told me, you know what? Feedback from your peers is that they can anticipate what your answer will be. So I was falling into that. It's hard to get out of that. One way to do that is just basically change the challenge. But the other thing is being aware of that and work against it, and then be more open to other opinions and to other ways of doing things. When you overbuild your brand, you may fall into that.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Jose. You hit on a lot of the principles. I love that. So thank you for joining me today. I appreciate you sharing your journey and what worked well and what are you working on. That's awesome. I wish you continued success, Jose. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandro. This was great. A lot of fun to do. See you next time.
Thank you. And everybody, if you want to get in touch with Jose, you can do that via LinkedIn. And remember, you can and must take action to start unlocking the power of the 13 principles in your life. Let's meet again in the next episode. I have another awesome guest lined up for you. And cheers to a more efficient journey on your road to champagne. Hey, if you missed Series 1, I encourage you to listen to it. It explains the foundational principles we are discussing in Series 2. Like this episode, please share it with your friends, colleagues, and classmates, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to visit roadtochampagne.com and join our mailing list, and to follow Road to Champagne on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram,